Hello, my name is Richard Keegan-Ball. Welcome to this special webinar about remembrance. We're going to talk about people with learning disabilities who need to have help to remember people when they die. Yes.
And hello, I'm Irene Toffrey-Weiner. Together with Richard, I'm your host for today. It's quite a full-packed programme. Let's just look to see what is coming up in the next hour. We have some really wonderful speakers today. So here's an overview of the people who are going to share their insights and experiences with us. The focus today, as Richard said, is around helping people with a learning disability to remember those who died. And that's a really important part of bereavement support, of helping people to come to terms and to cope with loss and with death. So how do we do that? How can we do that creatively? How can we think differently, perhaps, about remembering and bereavement support? And how can we include people who may be less able to understand or perhaps don't use words? And as you can see, it's a very full hour. These talks will take us right up to 1:30, but some of our speakers will join us for a discussion after all the talks. So if you are able to stay on for that, then please do. As usual, use the Q&A box for your questions and comments. We are reading and monitoring that behind the scenes. So do feel free to share your own thoughts and experiences there too. We read all of them and we may well be able to discuss them afterwards. If you're on Twitter, do tweet away using hashtag #PCPLD. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available to watch on YouTube later this week. And if you'd like to receive a certificate of attendance, then you can download it from our website.
We will start by sharing with you just a few minutes of last week's meeting of the grassroots group who took time to remember the people who have died.
And the grassroots group is a group of people with learning disabilities and without learning disabilities who meet on Zoom every month. And in November, we bring photos and mementos and stories of the people that we want to remember. And Richard, you missed last week's meeting because you were on holiday, and yeah.
The group held a minute's silence. We invite you to join in with this.
Okay, so that's a picture of my mum. That was when she was a child, and that's when she was like obviously older. So
oh bless her.
She's been dead just over 5 years now. When my mum was alive and when she was younger, she loved life. I think you have to enjoy the good times and remember the good times and try to forget the bad times.
To show you, because Michael was my art teacher. He kind of is part of our everyday life. We kind of walk past him, something he's made in the hallway, mixed feelings of feeling happy and grateful and desperately sad that I didn't get to be with him before he died, to hold his hand or be close to him. So.
And I've got to show you something.
That's a really pretty picture.
Yeah. So that's my mum. I lost my mum about 7 months ago to dementia. It was a very sad occasion. I cried buckets.
My granny's granny.
Oh.
So, and when my gran died, I found out that she'd asked that I get this picture because she felt like my relationship with her was a bit like her relationship with her gran, and that was just really special to me. And
So that is my mother, and my mother's name was Rosa. So yeah, I would love to have my mum still with me, but yeah, so today I want to say thank you to my mum. And I might need my hanky. So.
Oh dear.
Thank you for sharing that. That was lovely.
What's lovely?
This is a picture of my mum.
Oh, wow.
Oh, she's beautiful.
She's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I've written a poem. But I've also written it for other people that I know who live on the side. It goes like this. In times gone by, you made us smile, to boldly go the extra mile. Seasons came without much bliss. To see your face we'll sorely miss. A new dawn breaks, the birds do sing. To think of you is a wonderful thing. As hills and mountains filled with heather, our memories of you will last forever.
Thank you for observing that minute of silence with us. Now let's start with our first speakers. The Lantern community in Hampshire provides a home and support for people with learning disabilities. They won the bereavement support category of this year's Linda McInhill Award, and that's an award from the PCPLD network that recognises outstanding practice in supporting people with learning disabilities at the end of life. So let's just watch a short video that they made, which we showed at our award ceremony in September.
The Lantern community supporting end-of-life care planning. Staff supported people to think about someone they knew and who had died. We asked, how might people wish to remember their own lives? We created plans for every person their own, helping us to know how each person would like to be supported at the end of their lives. When one of the people here died last autumn, staff knew how he wanted to be remembered. We knew of his love for the Flying Scotsman and that art classes were his favourite. And we had learned to remember him together in song with our staff choir and to celebrate his life, how he wanted it to be celebrated. We learned together to care about the end of lives.
Congratulations to the Lantern community, and let's find out a little bit more about them. Our first speaker is Poga Lydiard, who's the manager of this community and whose voice you heard in the video.
Elaine and myself had a long talk with Berg about all the things they are doing to help people remember their friends and family. Here is the first part of the talk.
And some of the people in our community have also contributed to this, so thank you everyone for sending us a recording of your thoughts and the things that you've all done.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Poga. I'm registered manager at the Lantern community. It's a Camp Hill community.
I'm a member of the last community in London. I am, yes, so I get my support from the last. I do, yes.
And of course, I'm also a member of the Large community, and I have been for decades. So Richard and I, we've known each other probably about 15 years or so. Do you want to start by explaining a little bit about what you do in your community to remember people when they died?
Yeah, I think it was quite a long journey. We were asked to look at what people would like, how they would like to be supported at the end of their lives. So we had to find a way, first of all, for people in the houses to being able to think about it. That was the first thing. So we did a lot with staff initially to feel comfortable thinking about it. I don't think anybody ever did until it happened. And then I think everybody was so glad they had given it some thought. And then I went around all the houses in the community and spoke to the people we supported. And they were completely different. They were very enthusiastic about it. Not everybody, but most people really, really wanted a say, and evidently had also already thought about it somehow in different ways. And then we had 3 people who passed away, who had a lot of friends, who were very much loved and who had lived with us for a very long time. People really wanted to stand up and have a say. Also those who maybe weren't able to do that just on the spot and weren't able to prepare it either. I had already in other occasions done quite a bit of work with poetry and writing poems and giving people a voice that way. So I just sort of expanded on that. And when we first sat down to tell somebody has passed away or died, then I just sort of listened to what people said. And actually, I didn't even write anything at that moment, but I would write something afterwards, as close to the words they had used as possible. And then it sort of took off from there, that people really sort of engaged with it on very different levels to what I even could have done. So people put in gestures and sounds, and that was really, really amazing. And it also helped staff then to know how to support people during the bereavement, because you could just make a nice space and then you had something you could read out or say, sometimes together, sometimes the supporter would say it. And sometimes the whole house community could use it. And that was just really lovely. But people really felt they could use their own words and they just loved being heard like that. So it's great.
So you sit down together with people and basically turn their memories or what they feel or think about that person into a poem, which you then say together, or people can then repeat. Shall we just look at the clip, because you recorded some of that with
You used to go to your with me?
You used to go to you with me. What about you, Douglas? What did you say?
Ying dong. Ying dong.
Singing.
Ying.
Did you talk about Andrew singing?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
And Billy did something very special. Do we remember what Billy did? About Andrew? You got up and you made a roaring sound, I think. You roared like Andrew, didn't you? Yeah.
Remember how we used to do that?
Bang!
Slamming the door! Tap! Coming down the stairs! Whoa! Like a lion! Here comes Andrew with his warm heart. For the dozen on the big telly. Good start! Watching telly on DVD. What do you call a sausage that dries? Fires and smells. Yes, and Andrew with his big heart. All the kids looking for his friends over the fence. Mozart, Beethoven, Hampden and dance. Another friend that we found in the fair. Andrew had a special heart. Is it going to be quiet in the house now?
I thought it was very moving and very nice that how people express what they felt in words and poetry. That I thought it's a nice way of remembering him. Yes.
Yeah. What happens is that people experience Andrew the way they remembered him.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. On the day we sat down, we prepare the room so people come into a place they recognize as, oh, something is happening. So there'll be a big picture of Andrew, and we have flowers.
Poga, when you say on the day, you mean on the day that Andrew died? Is that what you mean? You do it on the day he died. Okay.
Yes. The paramedics and the police literally left, and you just have to keep it together then for another bit, and do this, because people know something is happening in their own home, and it feels strange if you don't know what's going on.
They have a right to know what's going on, to understand what's happened. Yes.
Exactly.
You become part of the same family you do when you start to live with people for a long time. You do start to become like a family, and that they get used to you, and that if you're not there in the morning, they want to know what's happened. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. But at the same time, you don't want to leave people
upset or worried.
Lost, and upset. I think upset is something that's unavoidable. Would be unnatural. But I think I don't want people to be lost.
No.
And I want people to support each other as well. So I just asked.
So you were going to say something, Richard, about being upset.
Being upset. It's about that you need to tell people so they don't get confused or worried or upset. You know, they need to understand what's happened. You know, that they need to be able to grieve as well, like anybody else needs to be able to grieve for the person. Yes.
And it's true, and because we've had lots of that experience, haven't we, when our friends died, and there is something very important about being upset together.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
The interesting thing is with the young co-workers young people living in the house, is that they are less experienced and less at home with that kind of thinking than the people we support. So it really needed to be something they grieved with each other, and they lived with Andrew for many years and shared memories. So when I sat with them, I just asked everybody what they remembered of Andrew, which I think also seems to be quite an important thing, to give yourself permission to think of Andrew. Because I think the message many people get is, oh, you shouldn't be thinking about it or pushing it away. So I went round and everybody said something. Andrew had lots of interests, passions. So yeah, lots of people remembered really beautiful things. And then it came to Billy, who was at the end there in this clip. He doesn't speak. And it's not clear how much he always understands. And I didn't think he would say anything. He sort of just watched us. And I almost was about to pass on to the next person. And then he suddenly got up, and he obviously was very clear what was going on. And he did a perfect impersonation of Andrew. It was really, really lovely. And he did it very warm-heartedly. It was just amazing. It was very, very moving when he did that. So that then went into the poem. And not just that, it also changed how we then went about arranging memorials and the funeral as well, to include things that weren't just speech, to also think about sounds, smells and other sensory expressions, to allow people who couldn't relate to language as well to be more included. Andrew also was non-verbal, so he was a great teacher for that, actually. So it's really good.
It sounds so important to do that together, and it sounds very much also like what we do in our community, the L'Arche community, isn't it? So
yeah,
because I remember when somebody dies, and I'm going to hold up these two photographs again, because we had that experience only not very long ago. It was about 2 years ago, wasn't it, Richard?
2 years ago.
That Carol and Michelle died within days of each other. Both fairly unexpectedly.
They were both very unexpected, but sadly Carol died 2 days before Michelle. So the way that we looked at it is that Michelle wasn't going to, she wasn't going to be left out in anything. She wasn't, you know, that she didn't want Carol to have the last say, you know, that Michelle wanted to be. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. When Carol died, you were right, on the same day you get together in the house, and as absolutely as you say, you know, photographs, Carol's hat, you know, she was a hat wearer.
Yeah.
Her toy, you know, her the things that she had, her sound, everything that reminds you of Carol, candles, smells. And we just come together and do exactly that. I'm interested in the writing down and making it into a poem that you can then repeat afterwards.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of then going around and sharing memories, don't we? And singing the songs that she liked and all that kind of thing.
Yes, we do.
And so it's interesting that you said it, because I think you're right that a lot of people get a message that you mustn't think about it, right? You must talk about the person. But we find, don't we, Richard, that actually what you want is to be helped to think about and talk about it more.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think also what you said, that the two belong together, Richard, that I think has been an experience for us as well, that most of us, and definitely the people we support, they say that always, that it's like the people who've died, they're just like a group, like a sort of background people who support them and who are much more part of their community than they ever were, I think.
Yes, they become your ancestors, don't they?
Yes.
Pictures are there, pictures in the same in our houses, their pictures are on the wall, and the stories are told and told and told again about the people who have done it.
Well, once a year in L'Arche, that we have a Remembrance Day we do, and that when we all come together, and that we remember the people who died in the community, you know, that we hold their pictures up, you know, like Carol's picture, you know, someone holds it up, and then that someone with a learning difficulty or sometimes that remembers the picture, and you know, and says something about, you know, what like Carol used to do, like, or what Michelle used to do. Yes, you know, that. And that. And we do it in November, don't we? This is why we thought we'd do this webinar in this month, you know, because it is really for us a remembering time.
Yes, we've also always had a Remembrance Day. Now that people have died, people we support want to be more part of it.
And I think it's so important that we do that together. I was really interested in also in you saying that the poem, for example, helps these young support workers who are not experienced in this and are probably worried about, you know, opening a can of worms, you know, or inviting emotions that they then can't deal with.
Yeah.
But the poem, it sounds like that gives them something that they can do to help to start these conversations.
Initially, we try and have everybody together every day, and we include the young people initially, but usually very soon there's the one or the other person who feels really confident enough to do it themselves. And then we just come together, we light a candle, have a bit of quiet time, and then say the poem. And I think, yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about being upset, so that often does happen. But because it's quite a formal setting, you tend to manage to be upset as part of it, and people are allowed to be upset and to see it, and also to see how you struggle through it. So I think for a lot of young people that really works, and nobody has to do it. I mean, people who can't manage, they don't have to do it.
Yes.
And then we do that usually until the funeral, but that's not something set in stone, however long it's needed. But then again, we do it also on all sorts of various other occasions, maybe because it comes up. Or in Andrew's case, it was his birthday, they used it again, because a lot of people we supported remembered the birthday and were talking about it.
Yeah. We're going to stop there now for a moment. Thank you, everybody, particularly all of you in the Lantern community saying that amazing poem together. Thank you for that. We'll come back to Poga and to some of the other people, members of her Lantern community in a moment. But first of all, we're now going to listen to our next speaker, which is Professor Mary McCarran, Professor of Aging and Intellectual Disability at Trinity College in Dublin.
She's doing research. She's going to tell us about what she has found out about involving people with learning disabilities in funerals.
Thank you, Irene. I'm going to talk about creating a good death and speak to funeral rituals for people with an intellectual disability in Ireland. And I'm really talking about these rituals during non-COVID times. And what I'm going to speak about is very much drawn from the data that has emerged from the Intellectual Disability Supplement to the Irish Longitudinal Study in Aging, IDS TELDA. And we have had over 200 participants who participated in that study over the years are now deceased. And I'm drawn from the last wave of IDS TILDA, where we had 74 deaths that took place between 2016 and January 2021. And 64 of that 74 people died prior to the COVID pandemic, and we do an end-of-life interview using the modified short version of the Voices questionnaire with key caregivers. So who were the deceased, just briefly? Well, as you can see here, many people, over 61%, lived in residential type settings at the time of their death. So that is a campus type settings. 18% lived in community, with a small number living in nursing homes in the family home or independent. The majority of people who had passed away were female. And I think what's really striking here in Ireland is of the people who were involved, that 97% of the population who passed away were Roman Catholic. And over 50% of people were aged between just under 25% under 60 and a further 25% between 60 and 70. And what's really interesting is we identified six stages of an Irish funeral: the planning stage, and supports at end of life, the Irish wake, the service, the burial, and remembrance. And I'm going to briefly speak to each of these 6 stages. So planning. We all know that a good death requires planning involving the person, the family, and peers. We have wrote about this before. And what our data showed was that 79% of interviews suggested that an end-of-life plan was in place. And I think this is very positive indeed. And end-of-life plans were developed in conjunction with the person, with their family and peers. And end-of-life plans, I think, were very important and used to guide the funeral arrangements. So we had an end-of-life plan, and that involved himself and his sister. So they were talking about the deceased person. So supports at end of life. We are increasingly aware, and this is taken from Professor Tuffney Wynn's own work, that significant others should be encouraged if they wish to be involved in as much as possible at end of life. And our own work would have suggested that it was essential that those at end of life have support from somebody that is familiar to them. So having that familiar presence was very important. And what we found was that 79% had support from a person who knew them well at the time of their death. And I think that's very positive. None of the interviews actually suggested that a peer or another person with an intellectual disability was present just at the death of the individual. And that could have been to do with the way we actually asked that question. So we will look at that in future ways, because our earlier research would have suggested that peers were present at the time of death. And this is just a quote again. Her sister was present, the palliative care nurse was there, and 2 of the staff who had worked with the individual since 2017, again emphasising the importance of having somebody familiar present. Then the wake. Well, Irish wakes are a celebration of life, one last party to honour the deceased. And the wake proclaims the death to the social group in which it occurs. So I think an Irish wake is very much part of our culture here in Ireland. The wake gives acceptance, it releases tension and allows a last informal goodbye. So it really is a celebration, the last party. So 51% of funerals had a wake or removal, and wakes were inclusive of the person's peers, the family, friends and neighbours. And there was evidence that peers of the deceased were given additional help to be able to understand the death. And this is all very positive. And again, here's some of the quotes. Having her wake here in the house is very important for all our residents, as well as to be able to see her and to understand what is going on. Oh, there was a big wake, the whole lot, and there was a full wake, and family, our friends and family members, extended family members who would have known him since a child, they all came to pay their respects. So this was very important to people, and this way, the Irish wake is really part of the grieving process. And then the service itself. 100% of funerals involved a religious service, and 90% of funerals were inclusive of peers, of family, friends and neighbours. And 42% of funerals, the planning of them, involved family and staff jointly arranging the funeral. 21% were arranged by families only, and this may have been because some people were actually living at home, and 18% by staff only. And it was again a little bit unclear to the extent of the involvement of peers in the actual arranging of the funeral. But what was very clear was that friends of the deceased were actively engaged in the funeral, reading prayers, poems, singing, bringing up mementos, etc. And again, I think we need to look at perhaps collect better data in future ways around this. And here's another quote at the Mass, do you know, everything was about them, and they were talking about peers and how they were feeling. It was great to see peers involved. So again, good evidence that peers were very actively involved in the funeral service. And then the burial. Traditionally, a burial includes a blessing of the grave, prayers and a reciting of the rosary. And 89% of people were buried with their family. And this is really interesting because many people may have lived in out-of-home placements. Some people have moved to a residential service or an intellectual disability service, perhaps at the age of 5 or 6, and were now dying in their 70s. Some people had never maybe visited back home to the original area that they came for. But really, at the time of death, there was this sense of giving the person back, the person going back home. And family and friends and housemates of the deceased were supported to attend burials, even if they involved a long journey. But I think the most striking thing here was this sense of giving back, giving the person back home. She wanted to be buried in the family plot. And even if she had been living all her life 300 kilometers away, she went back home to be buried. And this was very important for the person with ID themselves very often, and also important for families. But having the end of life care plan and this documented, I really feel helped to plan the person's wishes with respect to their funeral and death. And then remembrance. Formal remembrance involved a religious service 1 month following the death and an annual anniversary service for the person. And the interviews showed evidence of remembrance activity. There was evidence of month's remembrance service, an annual anniversary service, photos, candles, and informal chats. And this is just a quote which explains this somewhat. We have tea and coffee and cake, and we have the chats to remember him. And we have the photos on display, and we light a candle that we are thinking of him. I suppose it all helps post-death, like we can go and visit him in the grave if we want it. So this series of remembrance activities were very important as part of the grieving process. And people would continue with these remembrance activities for years and years post the death of the individual. And just to conclude, funerals in Ireland very much were seen to give a chance for the community to come together in terms of the death of a family member, friend, neighbour or colleague. Irish funerals are multi-stage events, and I think this is very evident from the data that we have. There was high levels of involvement can be found at all stages of the funeral. And where a person has been in long-term institutional or out-of-home care, there is a feeling that the service is handing back the deceased to their family. Oh, it was a huge funeral, yeah. Even the mass we had a mass in our house, and all the neighbours from down the road, from the village, from our community house, they all came. Oh yeah, it was huge, huge, huge. So Irish funerals are a big event. And then we all went in convoy down to where he was originally from, which was the town at the far end of the country. And we went there for him going to the church. And then we went back down the following morning to the burial, and we took part in the mass. So there's this sense of very much giving back, saying goodbye, but being very much part of the funeral event. And this is very important to people. So that's just a very short whistleblower tour of what funerals look like in Ireland. We have a new book which we hope to launch early in 2022 on end-of-life care for people with intellectual disability, and this is being edited with my colleagues, Professor Roger Stancliffe, Michelle Wise, and Professor Philip McCallion. So do watch out for that, and many of these issues will be discussed in greater detail. That's just some of the references if you're interested in picking up on them. And again, I want to acknowledge all our IDS Tilda team, the participants, the families, carers, our scientific and advisory committees, and our funders. Thank you. I'll hand you back now to Irene. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was really interesting. It's really important that people with learning disabilities are involved in funerals. It's important for them to take part.
Yeah, I agree, Richard. It really is, isn't it? So thanks, Mary. Our next speaker is Karen Pardo, and she is part of the patient and family support team at the Mary Stevens Hospice in Stourbridge. Karen works within bereavement support and will tell us about providing pre-bereavement care through creative legacy work. So over to you, Karen.
Hello, my name is Karen Pardo. I'm one of the bereavement support workers and I work here at Mary Stevens Hospice. I also do pre-bereavement and the legacy work with inpatients and day unit staff. And today we're talking about creative legacies with people with learning disabilities. This gives the individual a chance to make lasting memories with their loved ones. It also helps spiritually, emotionally and physically. This can help them with the preparation around death and dying. And remember, this is part of, you know, the patient and the family holistic care. It can be very rewarding, not only for the patient, but also for their loved ones, as well as yourself. Here at the hospice, we build these legacies and creative memories by doing hand castings, which have become very, very popular. They're quite detailed and can be very, very moving. You do need your patient to be able to hold their hand still in a bucket of gooey, slimy setting stuff for at least 5 minutes. But once they're unveiled, they are absolutely beautiful. We also do rock painting. These can be done for little gifts that the relatives and their loved ones can take home with them. We do hand printing on not only canvases but on paper as well that can be framed, and photographs. It's really important to obviously get consent for photographs and use their mobile phones or tablets. And that is nice to see two hands together holding hands. These can be put into black and white and framed. They are really special things to keep. Memory boxes, these can be filled with photos. They can be filled with cards, perfumes, items of that particular person, clothing, things that will be able to be looked back on, and this opens up conversations as well. It also gives you a chance to prepare that person. So these are a few of the items that we actually do. The hand printing, the castings, we do the bags, we do pillowcases, and again at the bottom is the one with the photographs. And these can be done by anybody. They don't have to be the person themselves. You can help them do these things. These are the hand castings that are done, and these are two of the ladies that we did them with. And it is very, very emotionally rewarding, this, because every single detail is on those hands, from rings to wrinkles. They are a beautiful item that can be painted, they can be sealed, and they can be protected. These are the hand printings that we did. We did a group one, so you can do family ones, you can do individual ones. You can also do them where you've got mum or dad and a child's over the top. And these can be done in any which way you want. You can design your own. You can do a tree or like we've done here, flowers. But they can be really rewarding. These can also be done more towards end of life as well. If the patient, as long as the patient has accepted the fact that you're going to be doing these can be done nearer end of life. These are friendship and family trees, where you put your finger into a ink and then just pop it on. All the family can then put their fingerprints on. So this can be started off at home or in the hospice or hospital, and this can be added to at any time, and names put on and dates. You can have the family name popped on the bottom then for yourself. These are the memory boxes as well that we do, and the memory beads. As I say, the memory boxes, you can put anything in these memory boxes that is a keepsake for you to pass on to your loved ones. Or these things might be something that you want to put in yourself to then give somebody else. So these are a nice gift. You can put cards in for future years down the line. And as I say, you can put perfumes in, recordings. We've got the memory beads. The memory beads can be made as a collective group. So a whole family or siblings can all pick out a bead. You can all have a bracelet, or you could just have one for the patient. Of course, we do hair locks as well, so you can have a piece of the hair. You can put it in little organza bags or some little bottles that we've got. And then there's also the death anxiety, because death and dying is such a taboo within the Western society. This can trigger fear, and the prospect of doing an activity can be quite frightening and daunting. So you need to be able to contain your own emotions, therefore using calming tones, open body language, and talk to both the patient and their loved ones while you're doing the activity. People respond by your emotions and your feelings. So if you are able to contain your emotions and feelings, they will feel calmer with doing it with you. So anyone can do these. It's open to anybody at all that can do these legacies and memories. And the beauty of the legacy is that it can be done for you, and it's all about making memories. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Karen. What inspirational work. I really love those hands. Really nice. Thank you. Now let's come back to Poga Lydiard from the London community. And you'll also hear from Cindy Mould and Katrina Etzer.
I really enjoyed listening to them, and I think you will too.
Yeah, I think we both did, didn't we, Richard? So
yes.
back to Poga, Cindy and Katrina. Preparing for this webinar, I've had people who are not used to thinking about this kind of thing saying, is it really a good idea to keep reminding people of something that's so sad? Right? But
it's not sad.
It's not sad.
It's less and less sad. I mean, yes, it's sad, but it's like you say, it's remembering your ancestors. It's remembering the people who belong to your story. And people love to remember it.
It's like their footsteps. It's like their footsteps. You remember that they were there. That they were part of what happened. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's also something very powerful about that part of your story. But also by remembering them, you also then learn that you will be remembered, right?
Yes.
That you are also part of other people's stories.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And that for people, particularly people with a learning disability, is, well, for all of us is important, but people with a learning disability don't always know it. Yeah, they don't always get that message.
That's right. Yeah.
So shall we look at Cindy's poem then? Because what you've started to do then is to prepare these poems before somebody dies, is that right?
A few people we support who then said they wanted a poem. Yeah, and I think for Cindy it was especially important that she had a say in it. I think she wouldn't quite trust if it was one of us doing it, so she really wants to do it herself. It's also not finished. She's already said there's another couple of verses to be written.
Great. Let's look at her at her video, because she recorded that herself. Yeah, Cindy, I think you're watching this. I'm so grateful. I think you're very brave and strong to record this for so many people to see. I think lots of people will learn a lot from it. So let me show everybody what you've recorded.
I carry my Bible in my heart.
That's lovely. I carry because you really do, in my heart.
With the prayers.
With the prayers.
I am a real princess to my real father, passionately believing in Christ and Jerusalem. I carry my Bible in my heart, playing the lyre to herald festivals. Remember me as Titania, the Queen of the Fairies. Passionate about theatres and dramas, and the dark side at the midnight hour. When I sketch and create fiercely. The universe of Doctor Who, of Star Wars, of Harry Potter, and Slitherpuff. Remember me, yes, Cindy, the real princess, feeding the white dog, the white good dog. Remember me, yes, Cindy, the passionate in the dark, with hands that healed and a heart that loved.
Thank you, Cindy, because that was amazing. That's a really extraordinary poem, and a lot of people will learn from this, Cindy. They will really think about this and learn from it. So thank you.
Cindy's poem. I think I would have remembered very different things, but what she says is so much more to the point and brings the vision of her immediately to anybody who would listen to it who's met her.
So Burka, let's then think about sort of other ways that we can remember people. And I was really taken by Katrina's story.
Yeah, actually, there was a project we did a while ago where we wanted to think about what roles people have in life and possibly what support they might want with the role they have, as in being a daughter or a niece or an aunt. And Katrina was really amazing in thinking of all the different roles she had in life, not just in terms of family, we also thought about it in other walks of life. And then she came up with this little story about her grandmother, who'd already died by that time. And she said, oh, I inherited baking from my grandmother. And I sort of said, oh, but you can inherit things, but not activities. And then she explained that, yeah, she did inherit baking. And I really suddenly understood what she was saying.
Okay. I am a granddaughter to my gran. I inherited baking from her. As a granddaughter, I baked with my gran when I was young. It was when I was young. I was at my gran's house, and I went upstairs to get ready for bed. And the minute I went upstairs to get ready for bed, I heard noises from downstairs, and I didn't know what was going on, so I went downstairs, and all I could hear while I was getting ready was there was pans everywhere and all sorts. So I went down and I asked my gran why. She told me that she loved it, and even since I baked with my gran, I started to study baking in college, and I didn't realise until a bit later that I inherited it, and now I'm working in a bakery in Lantern.
So thank you, Katrina. Katrina, you've really made me think, because as you say, Burga, you know, it is true that we don't often realise that we remember people because we put things that they've done and the way they've been into our own lives.
And it was exactly this what Katrina pointed out there already earlier. You sort of realize it really shapes your life. And to be aware of it, I think it's just a beautiful thing. It's just And I think that helps a lot of people we are supporting to think they could be doing something, an activity in memory of someone they lost. I think it's just a very positive way to remember. I know with Andrew, that happened a little bit. Certain people would suddenly start doing things they never did before just because Andrew did it. He loved classical music, listening to music they before maybe wouldn't have. And it really helps them, I think.
Are you using this now, Katrina's insight into how you remember people? How do you do that? How do you help people to see that they can remember people in such a positive way?
Well, I think especially for people who maybe struggle a little bit, having lost a friend, to then think together with them what they remember of the person and what they would like to do in memory of them. And it just naturally then is something they usually probably did, and then they do. And then it's a bit up to the individual and those supporting the individual to figure out whether that's something they do like Katrina does very determinedly. I mean, she's sort of the expert on that. Or whether that is something you do on specific occasions, on specific days or specific moments. One of the people we support, her mother died, and her mother was all about making tea trays. And the family gave her her mother's tea tray. It's just a normal tray with just a normal teapot on it and cups. And that's what we do together. We help her to prepare this tea tray like she used to do with her mother. That was very lovely. And her poem also was about making tea, making black tea.
Very powerful to have things and activities. I think it's helpful for all of us, but particularly people who don't have words, isn't it?
Yes.
You're right. I mean, listen to the music. Music brings back a memory like that, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
It puts you right back in there where you were.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
Person smells. Somebody's jumper, you know, mum's clothes you used to wear that you could hold and smell. And there's also many things in which we can remember, ways in which we can remember people.
And Andrew, for example, was very much into steam trains. And so that house, they're going on a steam train journey for Andrew.
Poga, thank you so much. Richard, is there anything else that you wanted to sort of talk about or ask?
No, I think that it's been very good. Do they in the Camp Hill community do like we do in last that when sadly someone dies that in the undertakers that you can go and you can go and visit the body. You can, you know, people can go and see the person lying there in the coffin. Yes.
Ideally, we do it, but in practice, it hasn't always happened. Has it happened in your case? Does that?
Well, not in my case. No, I'm still alive. I am, but in fact, you know, I have been to see people sadly who died in the community. Well, at least one person I saw I did, yes, and I'm not quite sure I really. Yeah, I have seen someone in their coffin. I have, yes.
Did you find that helpful?
Well, in fact, we talked for a lot longer about dead bodies and funerals, but that may need another webinar.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. This was amazing. We've actually come to the end of our allocated hour for this webinar. So thank you all for staying. We do have 3 of the speakers. We've got Mary, Karen and Poga still with us. So we will spend a little bit more time, 10 or 15 minutes, just to discuss a few more of the issues. But if you do need to go, which is understandable, then I just want to say thank you. Thank you to those of you who have donated £5 to attend this webinar. I know you didn't need to, so that was much appreciated. If you do feel that you still want to donate some money to the PCPLD network so we can carry on doing this kind of webinar and work, then please go to our website, www.pcpld.org. But let me now just pick up on some of the thoughts that have come up during this webinar, some of the questions. There is quite a bit of thinking going on about culture, And Mary, I'm going to bring you in first because there's a comment from Jane Bernal, who was really impressed to hear that you have set this Irish study into the context of culture and religion of the people who've died. And this sort of maybe to recognise how easy it is to make an assumption that we all share a common culture, which may not be the case. So I was struck listening to you, Mary, how in a way it's easier if you all share the same culture, and it's struck that you're all Roman Catholics and clearly have a way of doing things. Is there something you can sort of add to that and say about the importance of culture?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, Ireland and that particular cohort of people that who were aging that were involved in our study, as I said, were mainly all Roman Catholic. I think in the future this will look very different. Because we have now become a much more multicultural country than we would have been in the past. So I think when we look now at who we are supporting within ID services, we have people from all over the world. So I think religious and cultural beliefs will need to respect that. For example, I know that in the Polish community, it would be very customary that we would be starting even to plan the funeral service, maybe just when somebody is at the very end, and maybe doing a mass leaflet and all of that. Whereas in their culture, it would be unheard of that you would have any conversation until the person had actually passed away. And also other things that we might take for granted in our culture, like we would, spend time with the body, but the body might be left then on its own overnight. Whereas in their culture, you would just never do something like that. And they found that extremely upsetting. So yes, I think cultural, the context and the culture in terms of the approaches to death and ceremonies is absolutely really important. But I think it was interesting that for this older cohort that most of them were Roman Catholic.
Yeah. I think that's so true, Mary. And, we think about culture in terms of religion and in terms of country. But I'm just wondering, Richard, there's also something about organisations. Yes, you and I have talked about what we do in the L'Arche community, for example. That's the service provider for people with learning disabilities. And I think we also have a specific way of doing things.
We do, yes.
In culture when people die.
Yes.
So I'm just going to bring in Poga, because I'm wondering about that, Poga. We haven't spoken about that, but do you think there's something about the culture within service provider, within organisations, even within hospices, for example, and how that affects what you expect people to do and how to remember people afterwards?
Yeah, I do think it, of course, it has a big influence. I think for us, it was especially interesting because the staff living in originally had very specific ways how we would plan our end of life and also how funerals would go. And we didn't want to put that on service users or even suggest they should do it like that. But I think now we have come to a point where they have so much agency, they will jolly well decide that themselves. And that's interesting conversations with families then.
Well, I mean, it is an interesting conversation because that's, yes, Richard, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Burgess a question, and it's nice to see you again. It is, but I was just wondering if when people die in your community in Camp Hill, but is it afterwards, like a couple of months afterwards or a couple of weeks, that they start to remember the person a bit more, do they? To start to think about it a bit more.
I think that you are right. There is a period of time where everybody has to, I think, just experience the person in themselves before you can start sharing the memories again. I think you're right. There's a period, a quiet time after the funeral and the memorials event we usually have very close to the funeral.
Yeah, and it's a challenge for us, isn't it? But that sometimes some people take longer before they want to share memories. Some people, as you said, Mary, you know, in particular cultures and countries, really don't want to do this kind of thing at all. And you know, particularly now well, we're based in London. You know, our staff teams and the people who work together are very multicultural, and they all come with their own ideas and ways of doing things. And sometimes, as you say, Burke, I can be quite shocked by the thought of you know, of having looking at a body in a coffin. You know, not everybody, you know, finds that a concept they even want to contemplate. So one question that came from Tony Hall was that in England we do have learning disability nurses. There are all manner of people who work together, and how can we just join up all these different characteristics of people and their families? We have to respect people's family culture as well and where they come from to meet the needs of the individual. And it's very interesting, Berger, that you're saying that the people themselves are now beginning to say this is how we want to do that. Do you think that's because they have got used to doing things in a certain way within your home, within your organisation?
Yeah, and they have seen other people, how they died and were part of the funerals, often much more so maybe than they would have been allowed to participate in otherwise. So yeah.
So it's just something that I think there are no easy answers to, but to really keep thinking about and not making any assumptions, you know, being aware that what we do is also cultural, whether it's an organizational culture or a country or a religion. I just want to, so thank you for that. I just want to have one final question for Karen Pardo at the Mary Stevens Hospice. Wonderful comments about your ideas of and examples of how to remember people. Can I ask something about the memory boxes that you make? Because I think this idea of having something physical, you know, with perfumes and recordings and clothing, those kind of things that bring in, you know, the person to mind immediately, might be particularly helpful also for people who can't verbalize, who can't speak. So I just wonder whether you can say a little bit more about those memory boxes.
Hello. In the memory boxes, it's very much patient and relative led. So whatever is important to that person can be popped into those memory boxes. So if there's like a snuggle blanket or a special teddy bear, like I said, perfumes, rings, cards, an item of clothing, all these things that can be popped into those memory boxes as a keepsake that can be pulled out at any time to smell and to touch and to feel. All sorts of things can be popped into there so that they've got that smell of that person and that touch and that feel of that person. And these are all beautiful memories that, you know, can be kept for years and years and years in those boxes.
Yeah. And some really lovely ideas there, Karen, because I think we need a lot of different kinds of things, you know, to suit different people. So thank you for that. Just one final question to you, Karen. Is there a way that you, because it seems to me that a number of these things, certainly the memory boxes, you can do, you know, you help people in the hospice to have those, but we can take that outside of your hospice and, you know, homes can do that themselves. How about these handcasts? They look so exciting. Is there any way that people can do those if they're not in your wonderful hospice?
The handcasts can be actually bought on Amazon and in other places, Hobbycraft I think do them as well. And it's just a case of reading the instructions, following the instructions, and doing it together. They are very, very easy to do, and they're just so wonderful. They're really, it's an actual item that can be cherished and looked at for a long, long time.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I never imagined that I would get something on Amazon that would help me remember, but that's a good tip, and we'll see if we can find a link to those. We're running out of time. I really do not want to keep people of their lunch break for any longer. I just want to say a final huge thank you to all our speakers. These are conversations that need to continue. You know, the more you can talk and about these things, the better. So Mary McCarran, Karen Pardo, Poga Lydiard, Cindy Mould and Katrina Etzer and all the people at the Lantern community, a huge thank you to your really wonderful contributions. I just wonder whether you can go back once more, because I could see that Gemma Allen, who is the chair of the PCPLD network, was sitting next to Karen. So is there anything you want to say, Gemma?
No, not really. Just thank you everybody for joining us today. I think this is a really important webinar. It's important for us to support people, to remember one another, both before somebody's died and after. So thank you to all our speakers and thank you to everybody that's also donated.
Okay. Thank you very much. So it's a final thank you and goodbye from me.
Thank you for coming and see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.